Yo, this is Chuck. Now, as any of my usual YouTube subscribers will tell you, usually anytime I do a discussion video of this nature, it usually revolves around martial arts. You know, whether that be techniques, self-defense applications, philosophy, or any kind of thing like that. However, what I'd like to do for this vid is to step outside of that usual stream of conversation that I follow, and to discuss something that, although related, isn't exactly the same. And that's conflict. Now, as you've no doubt surmised by reading the title of this video, what I'd really like to focus on in particular for this vid is what causes conflicts between groups of people. Now, I'm not going to sit up here and be all like, now let me tell you why it is that every single group of people that has ever existed in the history of humanity has ever gotten into a conflict, because I know that because of me. I'm not going to do that. Now, conversely, however, what I would like to do is simply share with you guys a pattern that I've noticed. Now, at this point, I've lived in 5 different countries, I've had to learn to speak 5 different languages, and I've visited at least 28 others. I've been as far north as the North Pole above Norway, and as far south as Ushuaia, all the way down at the southern tip of South America. And if there's anything that I've learned from all that traveling, be it through martial arts, be it through work, volunteering, whatever, it's that for the most part, people are just people. And you have these generalizable patterns that people follow in terms of kind of philosophy and in terms of behavior. So what I'd like to do is just share a pattern that I've noticed over and over and over everywhere I've gone in terms of why it is that groups get into conflicts with each other. Let's take a look. Now, as aforementioned, I think we can all agree that pretty much everywhere you go, people are just people, right? I mean, if we weren't, then we wouldn't be able to interbreed with each other. We'd be kind of separate species like dogs and wolves or something. And as a function of that, within any given group of people, you can always kind of expect to find the same statistical bell curve. Meaning that on this side, you're going to have some extremely intelligent people. On this side, you're going to have a few not so intelligent people. And then in the middle here, you're going to have this huge swath of people that are more or less just average, normal people. You know, the same thing goes with generosity, right? Like on this side, you're going to have some extremely kind, extremely giving people. And then down on this side, you're going to have some seriously stingy motherfuckers. And then in the middle, you're just going to have a bunch of kind of normal people, right? And at least in so much as I've experienced from my own travels, that goes for pretty much any kind of value or any kind of judgment that you can make about people. So now, let's take a look and see what happens when 2 groups of people that both happen to have this exact same bell curve distribution, but differing value systems, bump into each other. Now in the States, this side might be conservatives and then this side is liberals, or these might be Koreans and then these are Japanese, or these are traditional martial artists and these are MMA people, whatever. So here, right here, and right here, on the outside edges, what you have are the extremists. These are generally the people that are the most loud, they make the most noise, and generally speaking, they know the least about the whole other group. Now, what you have here in the middle is the integrationists. Now, these are the people that either have friends on the other side, or they've read books by authors written by the other side, or something like that, and they've just generally got this understanding that on the other side, there's a lot of smart people as well, that are generally worth listening to. Unfortunately, however, the fact of the matter is that these guys don't make nearly as much noise as these guys do. So basically, these guys, on either side of the equation, spend a whole lot of time just ranting and raving about how stupid and how illogical and how nonsensical the whole other side is. Basically so that they can take more people that are on their side and pull them closer to their beliefs. Now, there's a lot of different reasons why it is that these guys do this kind of thing. So sometimes it might just be because they have some kind of an egotistical power trip where they just need to feel like they have followers. Other times it might just be because they're really, really arrogant and they just haven't taken the time to bother to find out if they're actually right about all this stuff or not. In some other cases, it might be because they're trying to justify some kind of grab for resources like government money. Or it might just be that they're just generally short-tempered people and they've never actually had long-term exposure to people from the other side. Or in still other cases, they might actually be doing it for money. Like radio shock jocks or like those YouTube videos that have like 50,000 dislikes, right? Anything that gets a whole lot of people's attention can be monetized. Now, I'm not trying to say that the extreme sides are filled with like these super intelligent, mad, manipulative, evil geniuses or anything like that. For the most part, I think oftentimes they're simply being themselves. And this is something that just happens naturally. So now the other thing that happens as well is that when these dudes start all their ranting and raving, these people end up hearing about it. And then as a function of that, it puts all of these people all on the defensive, so then these people start to attack these people. When in reality, they're pretty much the same. Now I know all y'all probably sitting at home thinking, Chuck, bruh, man, where you going with all this? Now, as a university student, when I was living in Hong Kong and completing the business minor on my degree, I had the pleasure of taking probably the best class I've ever taken on anything, and it was called Managerial Decision Making. It was all about how to make effective, informed decisions as a manager. excellent. One of the most useful things that I learned in that class is the following. As a manager, anytime you're faced with a decision between two people, and on one side, you've got this homeboy that's absolutely 100% rock solid, positive that he knows the only way to do it. And then on the other side, you've got this homeboy. It's all like, well, to be perfectly honest, I cannot guarantee that this is going to be the best way to go. But based on everything that I know and everything that I've experienced, this is the most likely to get results. The person that you need to listen to is this homeboy. Reason being that he's very hesitant because he's very, very aware of the full complexities of the issue. Whereas the other guy can be really arrogant because he really doesn't know the issue that well. And as such, to him, it seems really easy to solve. Now, granted, that isn't to say that there aren't some people out there that are just extremely smart and they know it. Those cases are rare. Most of the time, they're simply arrogant because they don't know the issue very well. Or in the case of conflicts between groups, it's because they've never bothered to sit down and actually hear out the arguments of the other side. One of the things that you always have to remember is that anytime you're in conflict, whether it be between two groups or between two individuals, both sides are always right about something, or else there wouldn't be conflict to begin with. Usually in the case of both sides, they're just very, very cognizant about the things that they're right about, and they know that they're right about them, and they're simply unaware with other factors that are also affecting the outcome. Or they may simply be wrong about some things, and they simply don't know it. And the only way you find out is when you actually sit down and talk to somebody from the other side. And then you start to see their perspective, and then you find that it has a certain logic. The other thing to keep in mind as well is that generally speaking, people always behave in terms of a certain framework of logic. So if somebody behaves in a way that's really illogical to you, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're illogical. What it may mean is that you simply don't understand their logic. And you have to learn it in order to make sense of their behavior. So aside from all the martial arts stuff, one of the other things that I do out here in Japan is I work as a freelance business consultant for really big Japanese companies. Meaning that I help them with assertiveness, negotiation, and leadership training. One of the things that always comes up whenever I'm doing these kinds of consultation jobs, whether it be alongside other Americans or alongside Chinese consultants or whatever, is the fact that people are like icebergs. Meaning this, above the water, the part that you have or the part that you can see is behavior. Below the water, or the part that you can't see, is their intentions and their values. Now, I have been in oceans filled with icebergs before, but I wasn't actually driving at the time. But anyway, I'm going to assume that much like when you're trying to maneuver a ship through a sea filled with icebergs, you can't just look at what you can see with your own eyes. You have to understand what's going on below the water as well, or else you're going to get into serious trouble. Especially when you're dealing with people who have a different kind of logic or a different philosophy than you do. Now, case in point, here in Japan, every once in a while, you run into people who just refuse to make any kind of eye contact with you. And in the West, you might take that as a sign that maybe they're lying to you, or that they're shady, or that they don't respect you, or something like that. But in actuality, the reason that they're doing it is because they're actually trying to respect you. Because excessive eye contact can be taken as aggressive. They're simply overcompensating, or they're simply overdoing it. But their intention is actually noble. Now, another example that I've run into from time to time is the fact that with a lot of older Japanese businessmen, oftentimes when they're listening to you, they might sit there, do like this, and then close their eyes like this. Now, again, in the West, we might take this to mean, okay, well, this guy's trying to fall asleep on me, or he obviously doesn't care about what I'm saying. But for them, the reason that they're actually doing it is because they're trying to close their eyes, focus out everything else, and then simply focus on your words. So they're actually listening really intensely. It just really doesn't look like it. Now, to give an example from the other side, in Japanese culture, anytime you receive someone's business card, you absolutely have to receive it with two hands, and either you place it on the table in front of you, if there's a table, or you put it in a name card case. You never just shove it in your pocket, and you never ever take it with one hand. But, for Americans who first come here and who don't know that, oftentimes when the Japanese person very politely hands them their business card, an American will just take it and be like, all right, thanks, bro, and then just stuff it in their pocket. So for the Japanese person, that's really intensely rude, right? But for us as Americans, we simply didn't have that intention at all. Our intention was simply to just receive the business card, and we just didn't know. You could even have the same dynamic between, for example, white folks and black folks in the States, where we're both from the same culture and we speak the same language. But, maybe two people run into each other. They're not necessarily accustomed to being around a different type of people. One person makes a joke that's meant to just be funny, or that's meant to kind of lighten the mood, but then it's taken completely out of context, and then things just blow up. And, this kind of thing happens all the time. And a lot of the times it may not necessarily be because people are trying to be rude or mean or racist. It's because they're simply trying to figure each other out because they just don't understand each other yet. The point that I'm making with this is that you absolutely cannot judge somebody based on the behavior that you observe without knowing what their intentions and values are, because it's going to cause conflict. guaranteed. So anyways, guys, going back to our double bell curve thingy here, the point that I'm trying to make is that the people that you really need to listen to within your own group are these people. Because these guys are the ones that are most likely to be able to understand these people, not these guys. So these guys right here are the people that are the most likely to actually understand the other side, to be able to effectively communicate with the other side, and to be able to reach some kind of consensus so that they can have a solution that, even though it may not make everybody happy, it's the most likely to make the most number of people happy so that we can simply get things done. Not these dudes. Basically, the important thing to remember is that anytime you're engaging in any kind of dialogue, whether it be with people from your own group or people from the opposing group, is that basically there's just as many really, really smart people, just as many really, really stupid people, and just as many really caring and compassionate and, good people on the other side as there is in your own group. And you always have to keep that in mind. Now, this is especially true with people of different races, because anytime you have people of different races that are fighting, if you remove the context that they're fighting over, they get along just fine. A good example of that is the fact that out here in Asia, there's a whole lot of beef between Korea and Japan over things that happened in the past. At this point, I've lived in both countries, I speak both languages, and I've had at least 10 years of experience in dealing with both cultures. Are there differences between them? Absolutely, sometimes huge differences. But are those differences so big that they can't get along? Of course not. For example, let's say that this is Korea and then this is Japan. In one respect, on this side, you've got these homeboys that have all these really, really nasty things to say about Japan. And then on this side, you have some Japanese people that have pretty much the same kind of nasty stuff to say about Koreans. But the fact of the matter is, if you took one homeboy from here, and then one homeboy from here, and you pulled them out, and then you put them in like Australia or in America, oftentimes when there's no other members of their own group around, that person from the opposing group will be the very first person they befriend, because that person from the opposing group all of a sudden is the person that has the culture that's the most similar to their own. I've got tons of Korean friends and tons of Japanese friends, and all of them that have studied abroad have friends from the opposing group because of that situation. Same thing goes with American black folks and white folks in Asia. Now, just in case some of y'all may not have noticed, Chuck's kind of black. And politically, I'm also a moderate liberal. But when I was living in Korea, one of the very, very first friends that I made, and one of the people that remains one of my very, very good friends to this day, was a conservative white dude. Because all of a sudden, I was black and he was white, and that gave us something in common. I think more than anything else, we were both just happy to find somebody else who is from Michigan, somebody else who likes bobbing their head to M&M, and somebody else who prefers their pizza without squid tentacles on it. And then the other point that needs to be made as well is that not only is it possible for both sides to get along, it's actually really important that both sides are there. Now, this is just a little bit tangential, but believe it or not, the way that the human throat and mouth and tongue evolved has made us more susceptible to choking than any other animal on Earth. But they evolved that way because the evolutionary advantages of being able to effectively communicate easily far outweighed the disadvantages. So basically what that comes down to is that two individuals or two groups of individuals, particularly when their thinking is different, can always create a better, longer lasting, or more sustainable solution to a problem than one individual or one group of people whose thinking is homogenous. Every time. Now, if I can go back to the example of martial arts, let's take a look at how this applies to the constant debate that goes on between modern contemporary mixed martial arts and then the traditional martial arts. Now, in modern contemporary martial arts or in ring sports, there's all kinds of things that you learn that are so incredibly useful for self-defense. Things like timing and distancing, learning how to give and take shots, baiting and trapping opponents. All those things you only get from stepping into the ring and actually having to go toe-to-toe with people. But at the same time, you also learn a lot of things that are really, really important for self-defense in traditional martial arts, like bone conditioning. Because let's face it, the first time almost anybody throws a punch at somebody without a glove on, they'll break their hands, because their hands simply haven't been built up or are not strong enough to take that impact. I think pretty much every adult male either has themselves or has had some friend that's broken their hand in a street fight before, right? Beyond that, there's also a lot of self-defense techniques that were developed purely and strictly for self-defense in traditional martial arts that absolutely cannot be tested or cannot be used on people in the ring. Things like eye gouges or like boxing people's ears or things designed to blow people's knees out and things like that. Stuff that in a serious life or death situation, you may need to use and that may save your life. Particularly in multiple opponent scenarios where you may not have time to do a lot of combinations or to get tied up with somebody on the ground. So if you ask me, which one is the most likely to aptly prepare you for any and every kind of self-defense situation, I would say neither one of them exclusively, but both of them together. Same thing if you look at the American political situation. In one respect, we really need conservatives because, at least in the traditional sense, they kind of constituted the backbone of society and they remind us of where we're from and the values that have gotten us this far. On the other hand, however, we also need liberals because sometimes those values become outdated and they need to be questioned. Sometimes it sucks when you have to butt heads with people and it can be uncomfortable, but the fact of the matter is, in dealing with people who think differently than you, that is how you can create the best solution. So anyways guys, I'm going to stop here because this is probably already going to be like a 20-minute video or something, and this being YouTube, I'm assuming that you probably have better things to do right now. But I do appreciate the fact that you've actually stuck with it all the way to the end to hear what I've got to say. Thank you. By the way, this is not the only video that I plan on doing on conflict. The next one's going to be on men and women. That'll be fun. See ya!